Donald Trump is very nervous right now because Europe and Ukraine didn't fall for the Russian peace plan. European leaders created their own Ukraine peace plan in response to the earlier 28-point proposal by United States and Russian presidential representatives Steve Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev. Unlike the Witkoff-Dmitriev plan, the draft of the European proposals does not impose any restrictions on the armed forces of Ukraine. It also includes a provision for returning control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the destroyed Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant to Kyiv. The document also states Ukraine will have free ship passage on the Dnipro River and control of the Kinburn Spit. But that's not all. Right now, negotiations between the Ukrainian and American delegations on the final format of the peace plan have just concluded in Geneva, and in Kyiv they're already hinting that the Americans have made certain concessions after all. And now, there's even a press conference where Andriy Yermak, the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, says that the first session of negotiations with the American delegation in Geneva has concluded. We had a very productive meeting, made very good progress, and are moving forward toward a just and lasting peace. Soon the second meeting will take place today, where we will continue to work on a joint proposal with the involvement of our European partners. The final decisions will be made by our presidents. Everything still looks optimistic. I want to note that now in this episode we will discuss with you those very European proposals that formed the basis of the discussions with the American delegation. I'm Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, write any detailed comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link's in this video's description. And if you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so with any donation or subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I'll start the episode with the latest updates. In Geneva, high-ranking officials from the United States, Europe, and Ukraine have just finished the first round of negotiations regarding the plan to end the war. The American side permitted changes to its proposal, which calls for withdrawing troops from Donbass and limiting Ukrainian armed forces. European leaders have prepared a counterproposal. Zelensky said there are already reports from the Ukrainian delegation in Geneva on the first meeting's results. Quote, "There is now an understanding that the American proposal may take into account a number of elements based on the Ukrainian perspective and are critically important for Ukraine's national interests. Work continues to ensure that these elements are truly effective in order to end the war." Rustem Umerov, Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council and part of the Ukrainian delegation in Geneva, said the current United States peace plan version remains unagreed. However, it already reflects most of Ukraine's key priorities. He pointed out that Ukraine values constructive cooperation with the United States and their attentive consideration of our comments. He added that this allows us to move forward in the joint process. But the key role in these negotiations is played by the Europeans, who did not allow Donald Trump to quickly push through the peace plan written in the Kremlin. Even before the meeting, Bloomberg wrote that Ukraine and its European allies would insist that negotiations with Russia on any territorial issues should take place only after a ceasefire along the entire current line of contact. And this is only part of Europe's counterproposal to the United States peace plan, which is being presented today by the American negotiator. Let me remind you how this took place. First, the Ukrainian negotiators met with the Europeans, discussed everything, coordinated their plans, and developed a roadmap. Currently, the Ukrainian and American delegations are conducting several rounds of separate negotiations. As I mentioned, per the statement, Yermak says the first round is already over. At the same time, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that some changes will be made to the American side's peace proposals. He says, "We already have a good working version, which was created based on the proposals of all relevant parties," hinting that the European proposal may still be at least partly included. And here's where it gets most interesting. So, in their response to the 28-point plan of the administration of President Donald Trump of the United States, European allies are asking the Americans to provide Ukraine with security guarantees that would correspond to Article 5 of NATO on mutual defense. They also demand that frozen Russian assets be used for the reconstruction and compensation of Ukraine. European allies are rejecting Moscow's demands that Kiev hand over non-occupied territories in the east to Moscow. According to the European plan, the United States will receive compensation for providing reliable guarantees, and Russian assets will remain frozen unless Moscow agrees to pay compensation to Ukraine for all the damage caused. Other sanctions may be lifted gradually, and Russia will gradually return to the global economy if it adheres to the terms of the agreement. This is in the Europeans' proposal. The Washington Post previously reported that the Europeans' counterproposal includes removing limits on the size of the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine regaining control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Kakhovka Dam, unimpeded Dnipro River passage, and the Kinburn Spit. This is a peninsula that essentially connects the Dnipro River and the Black Sea. In other words, to ensure unwashed Russians can't affect Ukrainian navigation on the Dnipro. Meanwhile, Trump keeps pushing for a quick agreement, calling November 27 an appropriate deadline for Kiev to accept the peace plan. The media reported that the United States is pressuring Ukraine by threatening to cut intelligence and weapons supplies. Although on Saturday, November 22, the United States president answered negatively when asked whether the peace plan given to Ukraine this week is a final offer. Under the terms proposed by the United States, Ukraine must withdraw its troops from the territories in the east that Russia was unable to fully occupy. And the proposal, allegedly from Washington, also includes limiting the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, along with a number of other conditions favorable to Russia, which is why it was widely criticized. Calling it a Washington proposal is odd, since the United States has admitted it's actually from Moscow and is just being relayed to Ukraine. European leaders, joined by the G7 countries Canada and Japan, spoke out against such territorial concessions by Ukraine or limiting the size of its armed forces in a statement published on the eve of the G20 summit in South Africa. Also, Axios reported that President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky received a separate United States proposal on security guarantees as part of the 28-point plan, and in the draft document it is noted that any future, quote, significant, deliberate and prolonged armed attack by Russia on Ukraine will be considered an attack threatening the peace and security of the entire transatlantic community. And according to this point, the United States and its European allies, including Britain, France, and Germany, will respond to attacks, including with military force. Well, so these are the very same security guarantees under Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Overall, Trump's new plan requires painful concessions from Ukraine, but it also includes an unprecedented promise. Zelensky's main goal in peace talks was to secure strong security guarantees from the United States and Europe. And this, by the way, is the first time that Trump is ready to bring such an issue up for discussion, at least. This is a good step forward. And in addition, as the Washington Post wrote, Trump's administration admits that the security guarantees offered as part of the 28-point peace plan are still not strong enough. And to boost post-war deterrence, supplying Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles is being considered if a peace deal is made. Supposedly, they won't actually be used to fire, but they will definitely be stationed there so that Russia doesn't even think about making another move against Ukraine. So, friends, I'll stop here for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to give it a like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, Redactor.